in Climate Change Amendment Bill, HB 5/2025.
Thank you. I call upon the Honourable Minister of Climate Change and Management.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Honourable
It
Minister.
is a great honor to rise and present the second reading on the Climate Change Management Bill. The bill before you today is both timely and necessary as it seeks to provide a framework for the adoption and implementation of measures for climate change adaptation and mitigation, with the overarching goal of achieving low greenhouse gas emissions, including the need to balance economic and social development and the protection of the climate system in a manner which supports the realization of the right of all human beings to an adequate living standard and the equitable distribution of the benefits thereof. Mr. Speaker, sir, except where it is expressly provided to the contrary, this bill shall be construed as being in addition to and not in substitution of any other law which is not in conflict or inconsistent with this bill. However, if any other law or section of an act relating to climate change is in conflict or inconsistent with this bill, this act shall prevail. The bill is founded on the principles of sustainable development, which are also the basis of Zimbabwe's Vision 2030 and the National Development Strategy 2, the National Climate Policy, the National Climate Change Response Strategy, and the National Climate Change Adaptation Plan, and the Low Emission Development Strategy. All these documents which the ministry has developed over a period of time. It provides to enhancing adaptive capabilities and building climate resilience regulation of greenhouse gas emissions, facilitates low carbon development technologies and carbon trading, as well as instituting measures to reduce the use of ozone depleting substances in our refrigeration production systems. Mr. Speaker, currently there is no comprehensive climate change legislation in Zimbabwe. While there are various climate change related statutes, they do not adequately address climate change issues. This bill therefore seeks to provide a legal framework for climate change management which cuts across all the socio-economic sectors of the country. This bill sets out the rights that people are entitled to in climate change matters. It also sets out the guiding values and principles that all persons and institutions must adhere to in matters of climate change management. These shall also serve as the general framework within which policies of climate change management shall be formulated, serve as a guidelines for the exercise of any function concerning climate change, and guide the interpretation, administration, and implementation of any other law concerning climate change. Considering that currently there is no comprehensive climate change legislation in Zimbabwe, this bill also sets out functions of the minister, including giving him or her such powers as are necessary to carry out these duties. These functions include, but are not limited to, recommending to government which international and regional conventions on climate change and ozone layer protection Zimbabwe should become a party to, in accordance with the appropriate law and in consultation with the ministers responsible for finance, grant to persons such incentives as may be necessary for the advancement of climate action, and promote and facilitate cooperation and collaboration in climate change data sharing for national and international reporting purposes. Mr. Speaker, the bill establishes the Climate Change Management Department within the ministry responsible for climate change management under Section 3. This department shall be responsible for the administration of this bill through its various units. The bill also sets out the collaboration between the department and the Environmental Management Agency, EMA, in prescribing emission standards that are acceptable and shall be responsible for national reporting and complying with international climate change reporting obligations. Considering the recent prominence and rapid expansion of carbon trading as a global mechanism for combating climate change, the bill also provides for the establishment of a carbon trading unit within the Climate Change Management Department. This unit shall have the role of regulating the Zimbabwe carbon market, including preparing all carbon trading related reports in compliance with national and international reporting requirements. To ensure compliance and meaningful climate action, the bill gives the minister powers to make regulations providing for all matters necessary for giving effect to this bill. The bill also empowers the minister, in accordance with the appropriate law and in consultation with the minister responsible for finance, to incentivize as many as may be necessary, persons who advance climate change adaptation and mitigation actions. Mr. Speaker, the current global climate financing landscape is characterized by a significant yet highly skewed increase in total investments. The funding is heavily concentrated in mitigation projects in advanced economies, leaving developing economies like ours and climate change adaptation efforts significantly underserved. The bill, therefore, proposes the establishment of a national climate fund to support the implementation of climate change adaptation and mitigation actions as provided for in the national climate policy, strategies and plans. This fund shall also assist with co-financing mechanism to unlock global climate financing. The bill proposes that the fund be resourced from climate change levies, share of proceeds from carbon trading, carbon tax funds generated by the National Ozone Unit, the tobacco levy, and any monies that the fund may obtain with the approval of the minister and the minister responsible for finance. Mr. Speaker, this bill also seeks to provide for the mainstreaming of climate change across all sectors of the economy, and in consideration of the cross-cutting nature of climate change. Every institution, both public and private, that exercises functions that affect or are affected by climate change shall be compelled to integrate climate change in their policies and plans and budgets. Every relevant public and private sector unit, entity, shall be mandated to appoint a member of its staff to be a climate change focal officer, serving as a channel through which the entity concerned shall furnish to the ministry information required in terms of this bill. The bill also defines offences and sets out penalties for non-compliance, which are determined with due consideration of the severity of the offence in terms of its impact on the climate system and the benefits that accrue to the convicted person through the commission of the offence. In consideration of the above, and taking cognizance of the fact that the public welcomed the bill and applauded it as a positive step towards a holistic and comprehensive approach to address the adverse impacts of climate change, I urge the honourable members here present to support the bill. This bill is a right step towards enhanced climate change adaptation and mitigation, and supporting carbon trading and the mobilization of means of implementation. I now move that the bill be read a second time, Mr. Speaker said. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The question before the House is a motion by the Honourable Minister of Environment, Climate and Wildlife that the Climate Change Management Bill HB 5 2025 be now read a second time. Is there any debate? I recognize Honourable Matema, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to, for the second time, read the report that with respect to the Climate Change Management Bill, HB 5 of 2025, our Honourable Speaker say rush to the general overview of the key points before I go to the clause-by-clause presentation. The general overview of the key points. The following were the general overview of the key points raised in the public hearings. 4A. Civil society organizations submitted that the bill's framework and objectives should be expanded to include just transition, green economy transition, and inclusive governance to better protect vulnerable groups. CSOs argued that this shift would ensure that Zimbabwe's climate actions were rooted in social equity and ecological sustainability. The public emphasized that the bill must adopt a philosophy of leaving no one and no place behind, which includes updating language to be more inclusive of youth and persons with disabilities to replace outdated terminology. 4B, Mr. Speaker, say a major point of discussion involved the built environment, with calls for the bill to recognize that buildings contribute approximately 39% of global emissions. Consequently, there is a strong push for a national green building regulatory framework which would include certification mandates, a national rating system, and energy and water efficient standards to reduce carbon footprints. Furthermore, communities demanded more agents through the mandate of free, prior and informed consent, FPIC. This provision is designed to empower vulnerable groups, giving them the legal authority to give or withhold consent for projects of their land, on their land. 4C, to protect these goals, Honorable Speaker said, stakeholders also advocated for significant structural changes to the government's approach. This includes transforming the Climate Change Management Department into a semi-autonomous board to break down ministry silos and ensure coordination across energy, agriculture, and finance sectors. To ensure these efforts are transparent and accountable, there is a push for a digitized national climate change register that is accessible to the public, documenting everything from greenhouse gas emissions to community benefit sharing agreements. 4D, finally, Mr. Speaker said, the transition is envisioned as one that is deeply decentralized by deploying climate change officers to all 10 provinces. The government can support rural communities directly and uphold the devolution mantra. This local focus is reinforced by a proposal to legislate a minimum 40% community share from carbon projects and to ensure that carbon credit benefits are directed down to the ward level. Through these combined measures, Mr. Speaker said, the bill aims to create a low carbon economy that simultaneously creates decent work and eradicates poverty. Honorable Speaker, I'm now going to the clauses of the bill in terms of the findings. Clause 1, short title and date of commencement. Members of the public across all hearings concurred in keeping the short title of the bill as is, which is cited as the Climate Change Management Bill of 2025. Clause 2, interpretation. Mr. Speaker said this clause saw significant debate with calls to expand definitions to align with international standards and local realities. 2A, on adaptation and resilience, stakeholders submitted that these should be redefined to align with global IPCC standards. Resilience should focus on the capacity of social, economic, and environmental systems to maintain essential functions while fostering learning and transformation. Adaptation should be framed as the process of adjusting to climate effects to reduce vulnerability. B, on mitigation, stakeholders submitted that the scope must be broadened to include local authorities, the private sector and communities as active participants in emission reduction and the enhancement of carbon sinks. C, regarding just transition, a new definition is proposed describing a shift towards a low carbon, resilient economy that creates decent work, promotes social inclusion, and eradicates poverty. D, concerning the built environment, new definitions for green buildings and green building certification are required, noting that buildings contribute about 39% of global emissions. E, it was submitted that the definition of data sharing should ensure climate data is shared between organizations and ministries in compliance with the Cyber and Data Protection Act. F, the definition of response measures should be updated to include multilateral measures. Clause 3, Mr. Speaker, says, objectives of the bill. Submissions urge the bill to move beyond departmental enforcement towards holistic mandates. Key additions include A, an explicit mandating of free, prior, and informed consent to empower communities, particularly vulnerable groups, to give or withhold consent for projects. B, establishing a regulatory framework for green building practices, including a national rating system and certification mandates to reduce carbon footprints. C, adding specific objectives for nature-based finance, fiscal accountability, and alignment with the National Development Strategy, NDS2. D, mandating community training and education to ensure effective participation in climate projects. Clause 4, application of the Act in relation to other laws. The public welcomed the clarification that this Act takes precedence over other environmental laws, such as the EMA Act, regarding carbon trading and climate-specific licensing to prevent legal overlaps. Clause 5, rights, guiding values and principles. There is a strong push to ensure the philosophy of leaving no one and no place behind is central to the bill. In terms of inclusivity, stakeholders submitted that language should be updated to include youths and persons with disabilities, replacing the word disabled. B, it was submitted that clause 5, 2 subsection D, 5 subsection 2D should be edited to balance development with the protection of climate rights as enshrined in the Zimbabwean Constitution. C, in addition, citizens and residents should be empowered with legal standing to stop activities that damage the environment. Clause 6, general functions of the minister. Mr. Speaker said, submission suggested renaming general functions to the role of the minister. Stakeholder submissions advocate for a significant restructuring of the minister's authority to ensure a balance between strategic oversight and operational accountability. By renaming general functions to the role of the minister, stakeholders clarified that the minister's mandate should be purely strategic. Under this proposed framework, the minister's absolute powers would be curtailed. For instance, key decisions should require mandatory consultation with a specialized interministerial council or an independent climate change commission. This shift aims to prevent the centralization of authority within a single ministry and ensures that climate policy is integrated across the entire government. Mr. Speaker, say, in keeping with clause 38, stakeholders recommend expanding the minister's power to grant incentives rather than limiting this to persons. The language should be explicit and include entities to encompass corporations and goals. Specifically, these incentives should include tangible financial mechanisms such as tax rebates, duty waivers, and subsidies dedicated specifically to developers and owners of certified green buildings. This would transform the minister's role from a regulatory enforcer into a strategic facilitator of a green economy. Honorable Speaker, say, clauses 7 and 8, Climate Change Management Department. To avoid ministry silos, stakeholders propose establishing the Climate Change Management Department as a semi-autonomous board capable of working across the energy, agriculture, and finance sectors. The department should have the power to maintain a registry of green building certifications and enforce climate risk assessments for all major infrastructure. Clause 9 to 12, Mr. Speaker says, departmental units and decentralization. Stakeholders recommended mandating youth presentations within these units so that, I'll take that again. Stakeholders recommended mandating youth representation within these units to bring fresh ideas. Critically, units should be decentralized to the provincial level, ensuring climate change officers are present in all 10 provinces to support rural communities and uphold the devolution mantra. Clause 18, reporting requirements. Mr. Speaker said the proposed 5-year reporting cycle to Parliament was deemed too slow. Stakeholders recommended biannual, a 2-year reporting to Parliament to reflect the rapid nature of climate change. Additionally, carbon credit benefits should be clearly defined and directed to the ward level to ensure local communities benefit in a direct manner. Clause 14, officers and inspectors. Mr. Speaker said the director should be held accountable for public transparency, including the publication of simplified climate reports. To prevent the office from becoming overburdened, tasks should be delegated to provincial officers. These officers must have the power to inspect not only industrial sites, but also large-scale commercial developments for emission compliance. Clause 15 and 16, national reporting, public and stakeholder engagement. Mr. Speaker said it was also submitted that to avoid a bloated civil service, the department should leverage existing EMA officers through a collaborative framework. Clause 17, register of licenses or permits. Stakeholders submitted, Mr. Speaker said, that the National Climate Change Register must be digitized and publicly accessible. It should record greenhouse gas emissions, carbon trading licenses, community benefit sharing agreements, and the newly proposed green building certifications. Clause 18 and 19, greenhouse gas emissions, data collection, verification and compilation, measurement of emissions. Mr. Speaker said, civil society stakeholders called for a freedom of climate information provision to be explicit within the bill. This recommendation is designed to allow citizens and oversight bodies to monitor the flow and utilization of revenues generated from carbon markets and trading. To ensure that data regarding emissions and financial dealings is not siloed within government departments, but is accessible to the public for independent verification. To support the constitutional right to access information, specifically regarding environmental matters that affect livelihoods and public health. Stakeholders, Mr. Speaker, say issued a sharp warning against the potential misuse of confidentiality clauses by large polluters. They propose that the confidentiality should not serve as a legal shield for major emitters to hide the scale of their environmental impacts or the specifics of their financial arrangements with the state. Legislative safeguards must ensure that commercial interest claims do not override the public's right to know about pollution levels or the distribution of community benefits from carbon projects. The bill should include strict audit and anti-fraud obligations to prevent double counting of emissions and ensure the integrity of the national greenhouse gas inventory. These submissions aimed to transform emission data from a technical administrative tool into a public asset that fosters trust and prevents the marginalization of local communities. Clause 20, data sharing agreements. Mr. Speaker said the current bill was criticized for centralizing too much power within the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Stakeholders argue that the current structure creates a significant conflict of interest as any appeals against departmental decisions or data sharing disputes currently go directly back to the Minister for resolution. To remedy this, they recommend substituting or amending the current clauses to create...
Honorable members over there, why don't you keep your voices down? The honorable next to, there's Honorable Mtseami, and then who's the next one there? The honorable next. You are actually leaning over the table. There's Honorable Mtseami, and then the next one.
Which one?
The following one.
Me?
Not you with the mic on, the one next to you. It's Honorable who there? Huh? Honorable? Sorry? Honorable member, can you please stand up?
Majindu.
Honorable Majindu.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you may take your seat. Please, let's do it quietly. You may go ahead, Honorable Matema.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I will read Clause 20, data sharing agreements. The current bill was criticized for centralizing too much power within the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Stakeholders argue that the current structure creates a significant conflict of interest as any appeals against departmental decisions or data sharing disputes currently go directly back to the Minister for resolution. To remedy this, they recommend substituting or amending the current clauses to create an independent tribunal. This body would have the authority to review ministerial decisions impartially, ensuring that climate governance is subject to the rule of law and remains independent of political or administrative bias. Honorable Speaker, stakeholders emphasized that the mandate for data sharing itself should be expanded to explicitly mandate compliance with the Cyber and Data Protection Act by coupling stricter data protection standards within an independent judicial...
Sorry, Honorable Member, are you still on clause 20?
Yes.
Okay, you may go ahead.
Judicial oversight body. The proposed amendments aim to build public trust, prevent the elite capture of climate information, and provide a clear, neutral legal path for aggrieved parties, such as local communities or private entities, to challenge government actions. Clause 21, establishment of national emissions trading system and levy. Honorable Speaker, stakeholders, particularly from mining-heavy districts such as Buhera, emphasize that this clause must mandate strong and transparent collaboration between the Climate Change Management Department and the Environmental Management Agency, EMA. This is intended to prevent jurisdictional confusion regarding air quality and waste management, especially concerning chemical waste from large-scale mining operations. Clause 22, technology development, innovation and transfer. This is a high priority area requiring more concrete language and examination. The bill treats technology as a purely technical matter, while stakeholders view it as an economic and social partnership. In the context of the bill, technology transfer and innovation are the primary drivers of carbon projects, such as reforestation or renewable energy installations. Clause 22 subsection 1 and 2 allow the department to facilitate the uptake and application of technologies. In Zimbabwe, these technologies are almost always deployed within rural communities. For instance, biogas digesters, solar farms, or forest monitoring sensors. Stakeholders submitted that if a technology is being transferred onto communal land to generate carbon credits, that technology cannot be viewed in isolation from the land and the people. Therefore, the innovation and development mentioned in clause 22 must include a 40% community share to ensure the technology benefits the locals, not just the foreign investor. Clause 22, subsection 2, mentions collaboration with the private sector and development partners. When a private company brings a new technology to a district, such as Mbire, they often create a fund for the community. Without a model trust deed, a legally standardized document, these funds are often mismanaged or remain opaque. Stakeholders submitted that clause 22 should ensure that any innovation or transfer project is legally bound by a trust deed to protect the financial interests of the community. Mr. Speaker, said the transfer and application of technology, clause 22, subsection 1, requires physical space. Stakeholders were concerned that the government might facilitate the import and application of a low carbon technology on a piece of land without asking the people who live there. Free, prior and informed consent is the link that ensures that the innovation mentioned in the bill does not become land grabbing. It mandates that before a technology project begins, the community must be fully informed and give their consent.
Honorable members on my right, you can't be doing that. Honorable members, you're making noise. It's not fair. It's not fair at all. You may continue, Honorable Matema.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir. Clause 23, formation of liaison committees. Stakeholders recommended expanding these committees to include local residents who understand specific regional climate issues. 23A, there was also a suggestion for the inclusion of the Green Building Council of Zimbabwe for built environment expertise, as well as youth and women representatives. B, a new health cluster should be established within these committees, including representatives from the Ministry of Health, Community Health, workers, and traditional healers to inform climate decisions with health expertise. C, committees must include leaders from affected districts like Chikombezi and Buhera to avoid being Harare-centric. D, committees should provide monthly and quarterly reports starting at the rural level to ensure transparency. Clause 24, control of ozone-depleting substances, greenhouse gases, and equipment. Mr. Speaker, say clause 24 acts as the data source for Zimbabwe's climate obligations. Sub-clauses 4, subsection F and H require a register of importance and mandatory returns of data reports on greenhouse gases and ozone-depleting substances. Stakeholders submitted, Mr. Speaker, said that this data collection be verified and integrated. In practice, this means the digital systems used to track these substances under clause 24 must be compatible with the National Carbon Registry and the Climate Transparency Portal mentioned in clause 9 of the bill. This link is vital for Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which allows countries to trade carbon credits. If the data from clause 24 is not verified and integrated, Zimbabwe risks double counting, where an emission reduction is claimed by both the seller and the buyer, which would disqualify Zimbabwe from international carbon markets. Mr. Speaker said the connection of levying trucks carrying dangerous chemicals at borders is an enforcement link. Clause 24, subsection 1, gives the minister the power to control these substances, and clause 24, subsection 4I, allows for regulations on any other matter ancillary to enforcement. Stakeholders submitted that because these chemicals, like refrigerants or industrial gases, are the very prescribed substances clause 24 seeks to regulate, the government should use its control power to impose levies at the point of entry. The rationale is that the transit of these substances poses a climate risk, and the revenue from such levies could fund the environmental remediation and climate resilient infrastructure requested by communities. Without these links, clause 24 remains a narrow environmental rule. By including MRV, the clause transforms from a simple list of prohibited substances into a sophisticated economic tool that ensures Zimbabwe's emissions data is accurate enough to back high-value carbon credits. In a similar fashion, the levy proposes links to the administrative control of chemicals to the practical funding of climate adaptation, ensuring that those who move hazardous substances contribute to the cost of climate protection. Clauses 25 to 27, establishment and vesting of National Climate Fund, objectives of fund, monies of fund. Honorable Speaker said, while the fund was welcomed, stakeholders called for stricter oversight and specific allocations. To strengthen fiscal accountability, the stakeholders recommended that the fund should be chaired by the Treasury or an independent board with quarterly public reporting to prevent off-budget flows. B, stakeholders also submitted that specific funding should be dedicated to Zimbabwe's specific climate health research, early warning systems, and local technology development by the youths and women. C, finance must fund health adaptation and loss and damage compensation, such as replacing school blocks destroyed by extreme weather. D, a proposal suggests that rural district councils receive 50% of the funds to finance local climate management operations. D, regarding tax harmonization, submissions suggested that levies should be reviewed against the proposed National Health Bill to ensure cumulative taxes do not become prohibitive. Clauses 28 to 30. Publication of projects financed by fund, financial year of fund, books of accounts, and audit of fund. The bill should be explicit in terms of protecting the funds from being used for general administrative expenses. Furthermore, the Auditor General should be mandated to audit the accounts of the fund every 6 months. Clause 31, mainstreaming of climate change. Honorable Speaker said, stakeholders, including UN Habitat, propose that integration of climate change requirements be expanded beyond environmental impact assessments to include environmental management plans. This ensures that projects or existing buildings that do not trigger a full environmental impact assessment still undergo climate risk assessments. Clause 32, public sector climate change duties. Honorable Speaker says stakeholders recommend that public sector entities be legally mandated to generate empirical evidence linking their specific operations to climate-related health risks. This duty requires institutions to move beyond general environmental monitoring and instead focus on African-specific vulnerabilities and gender disparities, ensuring that the health impacts on marginalized groups are documented and addressed. Mr. Speaker, a critical component of this expanded duty is the mandatory development of early warning systems. Stakeholders insist that entities must establish these systems within the specific communities where they operate to provide localized alerts for climate health risks such as heat waves, flooding, and vector-borne diseases. For these systems to be effective, the submissions emphasized that they must be integrated with strengthened health systems, particularly in rural and under-resourced areas, and supported by standardized data collection. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure that public sector duties facilitate health core benefits, where climate interventions, such as sustainable agriculture or green energy projects, are explicit in terms of how they are designed and monitored to improve public health outcomes and community resilience. Clause 3 to 35. Climate change focal officers' duties of provincial councils, metropolitan councils, and local authorities. Climate change duties of private entities. UN Habitat and the Green Building Council of Zimbabwe argue that climate change response plans for provincial and local authorities must be sector-specific. They specifically highlight the housing sector, recommending that local authorities mandate sustainable construction practices, such as the use of green building codes and certified materials, to mitigate the 39% of global emissions attributed to the built environment. On clause 35, which outlines the duties of private entities, there is a strong recommendation to move beyond a mere designation of existing staff as climate focal points. Instead, stakeholders insist that large private entities should be legally required to employ dedicated climate change officers. Mr. Speaker, these professionals would be responsible for the rigorous monitoring and evaluation of the entity's environmental footprint, ensuring that emission reduction plans are scientifically sound and that the polluter pays principle is effectively enforced through accurate internal oversight. Clause 36. Offenses and penalties. The stakeholders' consensus, Mr. Speaker, is that penalties must be fair but deterrent. A, fines should be proportional to the damage done and not so high that they cripple business operations. B, conversely, stiff penalties should remain for major polluters who falsify data or knowingly cause damage. C, offenders should be liable for additional fines for each day an offense continues. Clause 37. Regulatory powers of the minister. Mr. Speaker, stakeholders from UN Habitat and the Green Building Council of Zimbabwe propose that the minister should have the statutory power to develop a national green building code. This code would outline minimum mandatory specifications for energy and water efficiency, moving beyond voluntary measures which are viewed as insufficient. The minister would be tasked with establishing national green building rating tool and certification system. This tool would allow for the systematic evaluation and rating of buildings similar to international standards like leadership in energy and environmental design or excellence in design for greater efficiencies to ensure they meet high environmental and resource efficiency benchmarks through their life cycle. Mr. Speaker, stakeholders argue that by adopting these standards in the Climate Change Management Bill, Zimbabwe can ensure its built environment is aligned with global best practices for climate mitigation. The primary goal of these powers is to operationalize green buildings practices by creating a clear legal framework for sustainable design, construction, and operation. Stakeholders argue this is essential because the built environment contributes approximately 39% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, the current bill lacks specific references to this critical sector. By integrating these criteria into national building codes and regulations, the Minister can ensure large-scale adoption of sustainable practices while fostering a database and tracking system for national environmental compliance. Clause 38, incentives. UN Habitat and the Green Building Council of Zimbabwe recommended that the Minister of Environment, Climate and Wildlife, in consultation with the Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, provide a specific suite of incentives for those who develop, own or operate certified green buildings. These included lowering the cost of property transfers for environmentally friendly buildings, providing relief on the profit made from the sale of certified sustainable properties, offering corporate or individual income tax deductions for climate resilient companies that actively invest in reducing their carbon footprint, lowering the barrier to entry for green transition. Stakeholders proposed the removal of financial hurdles for importing critical equipment, waivers on duties for solar panels, wind turbines, and energy storage systems to reduce the nation's reliance on fossil fuels. Exemptions for imported eco-friendly materials that meet green building standards and fostering a shift away from carbon-intensive construction. Mr. Speaker, the submission suggested that these incentives should be explicit in terms of targeting entities in addition to individuals. By offering tax credits, rebates, and priority permitting, the bill can transform climate management from a regulatory burden into a strategic economic opportunity, promoting environmental, social, and economic sustainability across Zimbabwe. Clause 39 and 40, international law and public participation. It was submitted that Clause 39 should serve as a bridge for adopting international best practices in carbon trading. The Africa Carbon Markets Forum submitted that Zimbabwe's carbon framework must align with international standards to ensure environmental integrity and prevent double counting of emissions. ACMF submitted that there is a call to legislate simplified methodologies for measurement, reporting and verification, MRV, that mirror global best practices, ensuring that local carbon projects are internationally competitive and credible. Clause 40 must ensure that participation is a continuous process. Policies and strategies should be translated into local languages and distributed to all provinces. Additionally, communities should be empowered to vote and decide on which projects operate in their areas. 5.0 Committee Observations. The following were the observations of the joint committees. These observations reflect the shared mood and overarching expectations of the Zimbabwean public regarding the bill. 5.1. There is a near universal consensus that climate management is not just a scientific or technical exercise, but a social one. The public expects the bill to serve as a tool for poverty eradication and social inclusion, not just emission reduction. 5.2. Honorable Speaker, a common thread across all provinces was a skepticism of Harare-centric administration The general demand is for a bottom-up approach where the bill lives in the community rather than in a distant ministry office. 5.3, there is a broad recognition that Zimbabwe must play on the international stage. The public generally supports aligning definitions with IPCC standards to ensure the country is eligible for international climate finance. 5.4, Mr. Speaker said, the most vocal demand was for a guaranteed 40% community share of carbon project proceeds. This is an obvious observation because it appeared in almost every submission as a non-negotiable requirement for social license. 5.5, Mr. Speaker says, stakeholders pointed out the obvious irony of a national bill that is not available in local languages. This has led to the recommendation for mandatory translation and provincial dissemination. 5.6, the public clearly identified that a 5-year reporting cycle is too slow for the climate emergency. 5.7, an obvious but previously overlooked gap was the lack of regulation for the construction sector, leading to the demand for the National Green Building Code. 5.8, Mr. Speaker said, while not always stated directly, the persistent demand for the Auditor General to audit the funds every 6 months reveals a deep-seated fear that climate finance could be diverted by powerful interests if left unchecked. 5.9, there is a subtle confusion among the public regarding where the Environmental Management Agency ends and the new Climate Change Department begins. This points to a need for the bill to be explicit in terms of definition, inter-agency collaboration to prevent bureaucratic hold-up. 5.10, the committee observed that beneath the request for free, prior and informed consent is a subtle shift in the power dynamic between the state and the community. The public is not just asking to be consulted. They are certainly demanding the power to reject projects that do not benefit them locally. 5.11. A subtle but emerging observation was the realization that climate change is a health crisis. The request for a health cluster involving traditional healers suggests that the public sees climate change as a threat to the very physical and spiritual well-being of the community, which the current bill treats primarily as a technical or an economic issue. Recommendation 6.0, Mr. Speaker says, informed by the observations, the Joint Committee's recommended areas for amendment as follows. 6.1, the Climate Change Management Department should be restructured as a semi-autonomous entity to facilitate cross-sectoral collaboration between ministries. 6.2, reporting obligations to Parliament should be shortened from a 5-year to a 2-year cycle to reflect the urgency of environmental shifts. 6.3, a legal requirement should be established to ensure that local communities receive at least 40% share of the benefits generated by carbon projects. 6.4, the National Climate Fund should mandate that 50% of its resources be allocated to rural district councils to support decentralized climate initiatives. 6.5, Honorable Speaker said the minister's function should be renamed to the role of the minister and be restricted to strategic oversight rather than direct operational control. 6.6, the minister's decision-making power must be subject to mandatory consultation with a specialized council to prevent the exercise of absolute authority. 6.7, climate change officers should be decentralized to the provincial level, ensuring a presence in all 10 provinces to uphold the devolution agenda. 6.8, the National Climate Fund should be chaired by the Treasury or an independent board to strengthen fiscal accountability and prevent off-budget flows. 6.9, carbon credit benefits must be clearly defined and directed specifically to what level to ensure direct community impact. 6.10, the Auditor General should be mandated to audit the Commission every 6 months to ensure financial transparency. 7.0, conclusion. Mr. Speaker, say in conclusion, the public hearings have underscored a collective vision for a climate change management bill that transcends technical regulation to become a cornerstone of national social justice. The overarching sentiment from stakeholders is that for Zimbabwe to successfully navigate the complexities of global warming, the legislative framework must act as a bridge, one that connects the country through international best practices and global climate finance, while remaining fundamentally anchored in the lived realities of its people. Ultimately, the success and legitimacy of this legislation will hinge on its ability to remain a living document through continuous public participation. The demand for the translation of policies into local languages and the insistence on free, prior and informed consent signify a public that is ready to take ownership of its environmental destiny by empowering residents to decide on the projects that operate within their own regions and ensuring a fair distribution of benefits. The National Assembly has the opportunity to pass a bill that is not only a regulatory achievement, but a profound instrument for national resilience and equity. I thank you so very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much, the Chairman of the Portfolio Committee on Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Is there any further debate?
Yes, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Government Chief Whip.
Mr. Speaker, I move that debate do now adjourn.
Who seconds?
I second, Mr. Speaker.